Welcome. This is the Enlightenment Show, and I'm your host, Laurie Schoenfeld. This is where Chicken Soup for the Soul meets the artist way with Nancy Drew. Our guest today is Polly Stewart, author of The Good Ones. We're going to be chatting with her today all about her new release and some answers that she's searching out within her own life. Welcome, Polly.
Thank you, Laurie. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Congratulations on The Good Ones. It just released on Tuesday.
Thank you. That's exciting.
How has release week been for you?
It's been great. I asked my publicist about this first, but I made a decision to turn off my phone on Tuesday, and it was the greatest thing I ever did. It was, of course, a lot of nice messages were coming in, but I just didn't want to feel tied to it. So I turned it off. I went for a hike with my husband. Then we had a launch party at a local bookstore with a lot of old friends and new friends, and that was great. So I think that is the ultimate way to celebrate Pub Day, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant advice, to turn off your phone so you could soak in the moment of just being in that essence of celebration.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was a real process for both of us. It's 5 years since I started this book. It was fall of 2018. So I just wanted to celebrate kind of what, all the hours that he spent taking care of things at home so I could write, and, the work that I'd done before it became sort of a public thing. So it was good.
Can you share with our listeners and viewers what The Good Ones is all about?
Of course. So the main character of The Good Ones is a woman named Nicola Bennett. She grew up in a small town in the Blue Ridge in Virginia, moved away for college, and also she really didn't want to go back because when she was a young woman, a friend of hers had disappeared. She was newly married and had a young daughter. And Nicola always felt a lot of ambivalence and grief about that loss that kept her from really wanting to associate with the people she'd known growing up. But then she ends up moving back because her mother's died and she wants to sell her mother's house. And as soon as she gets back to town, she ends up getting pulled into a lot of old relationships, old friendships, and inevitably comes to start thinking about her friend Lauren's disappearance again. But really, what I wanted to write about was that process of homecoming and how difficult it can be for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. I've loved the essence that you pulled, Polly, of the homecoming, but also the reinventing yourself, but also feeling those parts of the old you that used to be there versus the new you that's coming back to a place that still feels so familiar with all the same feelings.
That's so nicely put. I think we all become a couple different versions of ourselves as we get older. And it doesn't seem, for the most part, you feel like a consistent personality to yourself. But then you'll see someone who you used to know and they'll say, oh, you've changed so much, or you look so different. And I think being back in the environment where you grew up just kind of brings all those things to the fore.
Mm-hmm. What kind of research did you do to add some of these details to your story about the mystery that unfolded here?
That's a great question. I was just on a panel at Thriller Fest about research, and when I got assigned to it, I thought, what am I going to say? Because I didn't think I did any research. And then I realized that I spent a ton of time reading Wikipedia entries and listening to podcasts about unsolved disappearances, and it didn't feel like research to me. But it did ultimately go into the story I wrote. So in a sense, it was.
That's a really good feeling, to be enjoying listening to the podcast so much that it's research, but yet you're enjoying it at the same time.
Yeah. And I, too, we may talk more about this, but there's something about that getting enjoyment out of this tragedy that is uncomfortable for me and for a lot of people. But I am very intrigued by stories that are not solved. They're just sort of endlessly fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. Let's just dive right into that, because I very much love that as well. Why do you enjoy looking into mysteries that are not solved?
Yeah, I think of it as kind of connected to being a writer, although I know I'm not, a lot of other people have this interest, but when you're reading a story, you're always trying to predict the ending. You're kind of trying to write it in your head, especially if you enjoy mysteries. I think you're trying to figure it out. And I found myself when I was listening to these stories or these podcasts, I'd start speculating the same way I would when I was reading. And if it were, if I did happen to be listening to one where you found out the ending, it was often less interesting, in my opinion, than what I'd imagined. And I thought how strange that is, that your brain sort of turns this real life situation into a narrative. And I do think that has something to do with maybe with growing up reading mystery novels.
Hmm. What was one of your favorite things that you enjoyed about Nicola's perspective and writing her character?
Yeah, I think people always want to know how much of your main character is autobiographical. And Nicola and I do have in common that I was living in California about 10 years ago and got a job close to my hometown in Virginia. So I also kind of experienced that homecoming. She feels much more negatively about it than I do. I was really happy to move back home. And I think she ended up, I don't see a lot of people who I knew in high school, and I'm completely fine with that. But when she ends up in that environment, as I said, she gets she becomes the same person she was when she was 16. And it was fun to write about that process. It was interesting to me. It was also frustrating. Another character says to her at one point, you have thinking about these things that happened 20 years ago. And that was me as a writer kind of talking to her. So I was interested in that aspect of her character, but also sometimes annoyed by it.
Hmm. Were there some items that you've found on your own journey that has reminded you of your teenage years that has resurfaced at some point for you?
You mean people experiences I've had, or what in specifically are you thinking of?
Yeah, experiences or just items that reminded you of your teenage years that you held on to.
Oh, so sort of physical items. Gosh, I wish I had the clothes I wore in the 90s. I don't have any of them, and they were crazy. I mean, I was that era where people would wear like baby doll dresses over jeans. I would love to have those. Doc Martens, and just not much like my aesthetic now. So I'm trying to, I don't think that I have a lot of things, but of course, being back in this area, I'm constantly reminded of it, just because the place is really the place I knew when I was young.
Do you find it fun, Polly, if the 90s style is coming back in this like generation, and it always throws me back to like feeling like I'm 14 again.
Totally. Yeah, I remember the first time, and this might have been 8 years ago now, but I had a student write a story where they said, and they were playing oldies, like a 90s playlist. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe this has happened to me. This idea that our era is now the subject of nostalgia is just really strange, but I guess we have to.
We're in the oldies, yet we don't feel that old, but we're in the oldies now. You write in both fiction and nonfiction. How has writing in multiple genres helped to support you as an author?
Yeah, my preoccupations tend to be the same. I got to write an essay for the New York Times a couple years ago about the South Carolina Low Country, which is a place I've spent a lot of time, and realized at one point it's a majority Black area, and because my family had vacationed there, I knew very little about the rich African American history. So I spent a week down there just sort of researching all these aspects of the area that I'd never known anything about. And a place is such a huge part of my work that was just such a pleasure for me. I love talking to people about the things that they're passionate about. So I got to do a lot of interviews for that story with really interesting people. I do an interview series for the website Crime Reads, where I talk to crime writers who are much better known than I am about the books that they love. It's called The Backlist. And again, talking to talking to people about their own obsessions, talking to writers especially, is just, if I could make that into a job like you have, I would just be so happy. So it's really fun.
It's called The Blacklist, Polly.
The Backlist.
The Backlist. We will put that in the links. That sounds insanely intriguing for me, and I'm sure many will enjoy that as well. What is something or a few things that have been helpful for you on your writing journey, whether it's been community or different resources that you've had along the way?
Yeah, I was very lucky. I was one of those kids who I decided I wanted to be a writer when I was 7. And I always had a lot of parental support, which was great, because I think a lot of parents would have said that's not a career. So I was really allowed to pursue that. I went to boarding school to study creative writing when I was 16. And I still can't believe my parents let me do that. So starting then and then into college and my MFA, I met a lot of other writers. And to this day, that's the best resource I think that I have, because people can help each other. They can share their enthusiasm for each other's work. And I think it's genuine enthusiasm, right? Because we all love reading, or we wouldn't be writers. And then just seeing, what other people are going through in terms of their publishing journey is really interesting and important, I think. And then, as I said, it led into these interviews for me. So, when you mentioned community, I think that was what comes to mind. Just making friendships with other writers has added so much, not just to my work, but to my life.
Yes. You're also a creative writing teacher. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I teach at Virginia Military Institute, VMI, here in Virginia, and I teach British literature and creative writing. And I've been teaching creative writing for 20 years at different levels. And it's, I love it, especially because it's not the only thing I do. I think when, people who teach 3 or 4 sections of a creative writing workshop in a semester, that would be very draining for me. But because it's just one class at a time, I love going in there and talking to them about their work, sharing with them the things that I'm interested in. I always get a different perspective, I guess, on the craft issues that we're talking about by hearing how they react to it, because you have your own sort of way that you think through things. And then again, it's another form of community. And seeing them get excited about the things that I'm excited about it's such a cool experience.
Mm-hmm. With the good ones, what were a few things that you enjoyed about the experience of putting it together?
Yeah, a lot of people have been asking me if I knew the plot before I started writing, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I think I have to say it now. I had no idea where the story was going. I really just sat down to write something fun, something that if I were a reader, I would feel compelled and intrigued by, and just kind of followed where it led. So in one sense, that was a little bit frustrating because it took a lot of revision. I mean, I got halfway through, realized it wasn't working, started over, 10 times. And the first draft alone took about 3 years. But I think ultimately that was really good for the book, because if the reader is surprised, it's because I was surprised. And I just really got to discover who these characters were and the decisions they would make in an organic way, because I wasn't rushing it at all. So it really was fun.
How have you reinvented yourself over the years, Polly?
I just mentioned that I teach at a military college, and some people, friends from a long time ago, and my brothers especially, always say, you are the last person I would ever imagine in that job. I was a very rebellious teenager. I dyed my hair black. I listened to a lot of very angry music for a while there. So I definitely had, that sort of teenage phase. I mean, I feel like since my late 20s, I feel like the person I am now, but definitely there's a period that I look back at and I think that's not even recognizable. as me. And I think that's true for so many people, and maybe especially women, that maybe as we get conditioned to take on kind of the roles of adulthood, we become a little less, some of the angles get sanded off. And that's probably a good thing in terms of getting along in the world, but it is a little bit confusing to look back at your past self and think, that's not even someone I know.
Mm-hmm. I love how you mentioned how they kind of get sanded off. That's such a great description of like, it kind of becomes your normal. You become this thing you need to be, but then there's that lack of freedom that we still feel sometimes of, wait, I want to be that free spirit teenage again.
Totally. And I hadn't really articulated it to myself, but I think it's a great way of describing one of the central themes of this book, is like, how much do you let yourself be toned down to sort of please other people? And the women in the book have different answers to that, and I have a different answer to that. But there's always, I guess, a degree of compromise involved with just getting older.
Mm-hmm. What would your answer? What does that feel organically for you? What would your answer be there?
Could you restate that? Or I'm sorry, I'm not
quite
sure.
Of course. What would your answer be for how would you feel is a good space between being adult to you, but also having that essence of freedom? How does that feel for you?
Yeah, I think the most wonderful part of my life, but also the most restrictive part, is being a mother. I have a special needs child, and I learned very early on with him, I just had to be the person he needed me to be. And it didn't matter if I wanted to do those things or if it was comfortable for me. I just had to do them. And that's forced me to grow in some ways that have been really challenging at times. But I think I'm 100% happier than I've ever been in my life before. So it's been a good process. I think part of the reason is because I am a writer. As I've said, my husband will happily do everything so I can go on tour and so I can write books. And I think if I didn't have that, I would probably be a really hard person to get along with. So that's the right thing, I think.
Good job, hubby. Because that breathing room of having some freedom to create and just be, when I don't have it, it's kind of like that fire in me that just,
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure people in your life want you to be happy. You're better to be around.
100%. What are some answers that you're still searching for within your own life right now?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about getting older, I guess. I hope this doesn't make me sound kooky. I am not a big believer in astrology, but I had a friend do my chart a couple months ago, and I had always had this vision that when I was an old woman, I'd kind of like live in the woods by myself. And she told me the essence of your life is taking care of other people. And the more you take care of other people, the more you move toward that, the more you're authentically being yourself. And I thought, I really did not want to hear that, but I think it's probably true. It's exactly what we've just been talking about. I think about balancing being able to be okay, to feel like you have enough alone time and you're able to sort of feel like yourself. But I am, when I'm contributing to other people, my family and my community, that is what brings me joy. So finding a way to keep those two in balance it's really difficult. And I think that'll be a lifelong process for me.
Mm-hmm. We're going to turn it to the inner child question segment. Are you ready, Polly? First question, what were some puzzles that you enjoyed doing as a kid?
Some puzzles. I was always really frustrated by jigsaw puzzles, which everybody else in my family enjoys except for me. So I was always the odd one out there. But I think mysteries are probably the puzzles that I've always loved the most. I would pick up my mom's mystery. I have my middle child's 11 now, and from about his age, I was reading hers. And So just figuring out, I think the answer to a whodunit, Agatha Christie, I think so many people read at that age, and having that sense of accomplishment, if you did figure it out, or surprise and delight if you didn't, was just such a pleasurable feeling for me, and obviously led me, in many ways to what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Agatha Christie and Nancy Drew element for sure had me every time. As a teenager, was there a piece of jewelry that you were fond of or that was important to you?
I had what are they called? A black, and it was a ring that opened on the top. And there's a specific, I think people call them poison rings, maybe, because the Medicis used to.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I had one of those that I got at a thrift shop that I wore for about 3 years straight, and I thought that was very cool. I could never think of anything that was good enough to keep inside it, so it was just empty. But just knowing that I think I could hide something in there made me feel important.
There was possibilities for the future for you, Polly.
That's right. Good point.
What is the oddest food combo that you've liked and tried, or you have just tried?
No, combo, not just oddest food, period.
You could do oddest food or an oddest combo, whatever you want to do there.
Okay. When I was in Scotland a few years ago, I had haggis, and it is delicious. And I don't know why people think it's so disgusting. It tastes amazing. It's like sausage. But I feel like I have a reputation with my family now that when we travel, I am the person who will try the weird local food, no matter what it is. So I guess I have to keep up that reputation now, but I think it's for the best.
So are you the go-to, Polly, of like, Polly tries it first and then the rest of us will see if it's an option type of a feel, or?
Yeah, well, sometimes my husband does he calls it the dad tax, where he has to try everybody's food before they eat it. So he sometimes takes over that role, but I'll step in if he doesn't want to.
What does haggis taste like to you? Like a few sensory details. Is it salty or?
It's a bit salty. It's just it's so similar to sausage. Sausage is just really meaty and satisfying. It's not. I usually eat a lot of vegetarian, and maybe that's why I thought it was so delicious, because it's really substantial in a good way.
Anyone who wants to try haggis with me will have a show where we're all trying, and we'll tag Polly.
I love it. I love part of that.
Before we end today, Polly, can you share with our listeners and viewers what living a creatively abundant life means to you?
Well, I think what it comes down to for me is having fun with your work, with whatever it is that you choose to do creatively. I know a lot of people in my field, when they, particularly when you get into publishing, it becomes work. And one reason that I've kept my day job is because I find writing fiction to be ridiculously fun, and I don't ever want to lose that, because that's how I create good work. If I'm having a good time, the reader will be having a good time, and I really think that applies across all kinds of creativity. You should be able to do it for the joy of it, and find room for that in your life.
Have you celebrated yourself this week yet, Polly, with your release?
I think the hike I took on Tuesday was just wonderful. It was so restorative. We have this beautiful hike within a couple hours of us called Crabtree Falls, the gorgeous waterfalls. And then being able to celebrate with my family and friends, to see these people I've known for so long, who are so happy for me, has really been a joyous occasion. And now I'm going out on the road tomorrow, so I get to keep doing it for a while here.
Okay, and where are you headed?
I'll be in Louisville tomorrow, then Springfield, Missouri, Memphis, Little Rock, Oxford, Atlanta, Leesburg, Virginia, DC, St. Louis, and Houston over the next month. So it's a lot. But
well, look out for Polly. Safe travels, Polly, and congratulations on the good ones. Where can our listeners and viewers find you if they're looking for your book or have any questions for you after the show.
Sure. So The Good Ones is available everywhere at your local independent bookstore. If they don't have it in stock, they can order it. There's also bookshop.org and any of the big book retailers. I'm at Polly Stew on Twitter and Polly Stewart Books on Instagram. That's Stewart. And I'd love to talk with anybody who wants to chat.
Thank you so much for being here today, Polly. It has been an absolute pleasure. And for those who have been listening and watching and will also watch on the replay, remember as you go about the rest of your week to find the things that are working for you. You are the creator of your own story. What steps will you take next? Thank you, everyone, and have a beautiful rest of your week. Congratulations, Polly.
Thank you so much, Lori. It was such a pleasure talking to you.